Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. We have a New York Giants Victory Monday to discuss today, and here to help me do that via his phone, since his laptop is acting wonky today, is is the great Tony DelGenio of Big Blue View. Tony, thank you as always. And I see a smile on your face this morning.
Yeah, I think I've been smiling continuously since about 7 o'clock last night.
Yeah, well, the Giants gave everybody a lot to smile about on Sunday evening. Um, let me just start here. That's the most complete football game we've seen the Giants play this year. It's probably, to be honest, probably the most complete football game that they've played since 2022.
Yeah, I'd have to say that. I mean, I think they played. I think there's no question. I'm not even going to try to argue from any other game. This is by far the best game they've played all year.
Yeah, and let's before we get into individuals and talk about Isaiah Simmons and Daniel Jones and Tyrone Tracy and all of that. I think I want to talk about something that I wrote last night at Big Blue View, and that's the fact that this victory puts the Giants in such a different place for this season, and it changes the narrative so much from where we might have been as we sat here this morning had they lost. I mean, if they're 1-4, what we're sitting here talking about is how much longer can Daniel Jones be the starting quarterback, regardless of how well he might be playing, simply because of that injury guarantee and the fact that the more games they lost, the more obvious it would have become that they needed to move on in 2025. And the other thing we would have been talking about is are we seeing the beginning of the end for Brian Daboll? And instead, we're sitting here talking about, hey, they play a 1-4 team at home next Sunday night. They could get to 3-3. They could be relevant in the NFC, and maybe, just maybe, there could be some fun in being a Giants fan, as we go forward this season. It's such a different place.
Yeah, well, I've been struck ever since the end of the game at just the tone of the dialogue on Twitter and the comments section on BBV and every place that you look. And I mean, what happens with all of this is that you go from a team that looks like it can't win a game, even though they managed to win one, to a team that they say, well, they're 2-3, but really they were close to being 3-2, and they weren't far from being 4-1. And you can argue that they should have won both the Washington and the Dallas games. And really, the only lopsided loss that they've had so far this season was the opening game against Minnesota. And here we are 5 weeks into the season, and no one's beaten Minnesota yet. And so it puts everything in a different light to actually get another win in the books, and this time against a pretty good team. I mean, Seattle is this. I don't think Seattle's a threat to win the Super Bowl by any means, but they're a good team that many people have suggested might make the playoffs.
Right. Pretty good team in a very, very difficult environment in which to play. And also, Tony, I'm struck by something else. I happened to look this up the other day and go back to last year. And yes, the Giants finished 6-11, and yes, they're 2-3 right now. But I'm not sure, and it may not mean a whole heck of a lot, but the Giants are 7-5 in their last 12 games. So maybe, just maybe, they're not the poor, bedraggled, awful downtrodden football team that they've been portrayed to be. Maybe, just maybe, there's some reason for optimism this season.
Yeah, well, the thing about last season, the people who wanted to be negative about things were saying, yeah, they were 6-11 last season, but almost all the games that they won were after Jones went down, and they won those games with Tyrod Taylor and Tommy DeVito. Well, now they've gone through 5 games with a couple of victories under Daniel Jones, and a couple of victories in which Daniel Jones has played well, and that's the most important thing. It's not just that they've won a couple of games with him. They've won a couple of games partly because of him, only partly because of him, because the rest of the team, I thought, played very well yesterday. Especially, I think that across the board, actually, the team, I think, played well yesterday. I was going to say especially the defense, but I thought the offense played well too, and they controlled the clock and all of that. And so, yeah, there's some reason for optimism. I think just the whole vibe is they're not such a bad team. Right. And they may not be a great team, but they're not such a bad team.
No, they're not. Tony, since you mentioned him, Daniel Jones is on the list of things that we have to talk about. And listen, I said last week at Big Blue View, Daniel Jones is a mediocre quarterback, middle of the road quarterback. Played well Sunday for the 4th week in a row. And the advanced analytics will tell you that he's a borderline top 10 quarterback in the NFL so far this year. And I'm not going to make some argument that he's a superstar and I don't know what's going to happen, going forward after this year. But can we please stop the narrative that Daniel Jones sucks? Because he doesn't suck. I mean, he plays bad football games every so often, but if you look around the NFL, and you look at some of the quarterback play, there's a lot of guys who have bad games every so often. The guy doesn't suck. The guy plays his guts out. And whatever you think of him, let's give him some props for what he's done so far this year.
Yeah, last week against Dallas, I think we were all surprised that PFF wound up giving Daniel Jones a score of, I think, like 80 point something. And I think the reaction of most of us was, well, yeah, he played pretty well and he led the Giants on 5 scoring drives, but he couldn't get them into the end zone a single time during the game and only put 15 points up on the board. And yesterday was different because yesterday I thought he was playing at least as well as he played against Dallas last week, but really better because he was, I thought, controlling the offense more. He hit a couple of deep shots. I thought he was making smart decisions. I thought he was going through reads and showing a little bit of anticipation sometimes on his. So he was doing the things that you want to see a good quarterback do on the field. And most importantly, he got them into the end zone twice and really effectively got them into the end zone 3 times were it not for the call of the fumble on the goal line by Eric Gray. And that's against a pretty good defense and a defense with a good pass defense in particular. So to me, this was his best game of the season, the most complete game of the season.
Absolutely. Who knows what's going to happen going forward, but he put to bed the narrative that he can't throw the deep ball. He threw 2 beautiful deep balls to Darius Slayton. The first one, the 41-yarder, Brian Daboll was gushing after the game about the 41-yarder, and he wasn't gushing about the ball placement. He's gushing about the read by Daniel Jones because Slayton wasn't the primary target on the play. And he probably, if I read Daboll's quote correctly, probably wasn't exactly where he was supposed to be on the play either. And Daboll called it an unbelievable play by Jones to read that play, to figure it out, and to deliver that throw. And, Daniel Jones is not ever going to be a top 5 quarterback. He's not ever going to be, the considered a Hall of Fame type quarterback, but I just want to give him credit for what he's been doing. And yesterday was the best that I think he's played this year, and in a long while. And let's give him credit too for throwing a stiff arm, throwing a shoulder, sticking his head in there, trying to run through some people. And this is a guy coming off a torn ACL, coming off a second neck injury, and protecting his body is not necessarily on his mind. Winning football games is, and I just feel like, and I don't want to come off sounding like a Daniel Jones fanboy, because I recognize the bad football he's played in the past, but I just want the guy to get the props he deserves right now, when he's playing really well.
Yeah, and on the particular play that you mentioned to Slayton, it was a throw from the far hash down the sideline for Slayton. And so this is the other thing, is that people talk about Jones not having the arm strength and the arm talent that some other quarterbacks do. And I think no one will argue that he has the arm strength and arm talent of a Justin Herbert, let's say, okay, who's remarkable. Even of Jaden Daniels, who looks like he's really the real deal out there. He doesn't have those qualities of the most physically gifted quarterbacks. But I think what he showed yesterday, on that play in particular, is that he can do more than just a half field read, which is something that he was kind of, nursed on when he first came into the league by Pat Shurmur. And that's the reputation that he's developed, is that teams can just play half the field against him and be confident that he's not going to pass back to the other half of the field. Well, on that play to Slayton, which I think was a 41-yarder, that was from the far hash, and that's exactly the type of thing. And it wasn't his first read, according to what Dable was saying. And so he was doing all the things that you want a quarterback to do, and you don't necessarily have to have a Justin Herbert arm to be a very good quarterback in the NFL. And some weeks, yesterday he was very good. Some weeks he's not very good, and that's why overall he's more of a middle of the road quarterback. But he's good enough to win you a significant number of games. If you want to say he's not good enough to win a Super Bowl, that might be right. But probably there are 25 teams in the NFL who would say the same thing about their quarterback. There are really, today, maybe only a half a dozen or so quarterbacks that you really think could be the reason why their team wins the Super Bowl.
Right. And Jones did yesterday something he hasn't done often enough in his career. And he was a big part of the reason that the Giants won the football game. He made plays that were above and beyond just not screwing it up and letting everybody else win the game. He was a big part of the reason that they won the football game. So props to him. And we're almost 15 minutes into the show, Tony. So I think we should maybe move on to another topic, and let's talk about the play by Isaiah Simmons. I was reading more about that play this morning, the transcript from Isaiah Simmons, and the Giants apparently began discussing this play on Tuesday, and it's a particular style of rush. And I've had people say, well, why don't they use that on every play? Well, you can't, because if you bust out that kind of thing on every play, then teams are going to scout it. They're going to study it. They're going to figure out how to block it if they know that's exactly what you're going to do. But Isaiah Simmons also said, you know how many practice reps the Giants did of this particular play with Isaiah Simmons lined up in the middle?
No.
One during Friday's walkthrough. Yeah. They did one practice rep of this play. And that's it. The second time that Isaiah Simmons ever did this was Sunday live with the game on the line. And I just find that amazing. It's like when you're in the sandlot and you're drawing stuff up in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Yeah, I was reading more about it too from a different angle. That was the angle of the Seattle
Yeah, I read some of
fans
that too.
who thought that the Giants should have been called for a penalty on the play, but actually I saw several discussions of it, and the way they did it, they actually did it legally. So he's allowed to jump over the lineman as long as he doesn't get a running start. If you get a running start, that's now disallowed in the NFL.
And the other part of that was he was not aligned over the center.
Yeah,
He technically didn't jump over the center. What he technically did was jump between blockers.
right through the A gap. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
he went right through the A gap. Yeah, and then the other part of it, if you actually watch the play in slow motion, is that the guys that the Giants did have on the line essentially just pushed the linemen that they were opposite down to clear that A gap a little more. And again, people thought that's illegal. You can't do that, but actually, the NFL says that is legal to do. And so while there were doubts about the legality of the play, apparently they did everything by the books. And yeah, props to, I guess it's Michael Gobriel, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
He's the special teams coach, and he supposedly went to Dable with this idea about doing this play. And yeah, God bless them, but for once a weird play like that worked.
Absolutely. And it's just you don't see the Giants on the winning end of plays like that very often. And the only other thing I will say is I'm not sure who the lineman was, but I'm not sure I'd want to get pushed face first into the turf by 360-pound Dexter Lawrence. And we found out yesterday on the broadcast that Dexter's listed weight is 340, but he admitted to 360. He admitted to, I think, Jason McCourty, he admitted to 360, which just makes him even more amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a mental image of what a 360 versus 340-pound person is supposed to look like, but when I see Dexter Lawrence, I think you could give me any number and I'd say, okay, yeah, I believe that.
Yeah, I have stood next to Dexter Lawrence often enough in the locker room to know that he is utterly massive. And when he walks down the hallway with a teammate, any teammate, if they're side by side, they barely fit down the hallway. So you make sure you get out of the way.
and just getting serious, for a minute, the amazing thing about Dexter Lawrence is his athleticism for his size. I mean, he's not right there. There are big, huge guys who are just space eaters on the line, but he has such quickness, in addition to tremendous power, of course, right? But he has such quickness for his size, also, that it amazes me what he's able to do on a football field.
Absolutely, Tony. And since we're on that side of the ball, we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but defensively, I really want to give props to three players. Tay Banks, who played exceptionally well after being publicly dressed down by defensive backs coach Jerome Henderson during the week. That's how you respond to criticism. That's how you show the kind of player that you are. And Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau, not fantastic numbers, because, some dummy who runs the Big Blue View Twitter account tweeted toward the end of the third quarter that Burns and Thibodeau hadn't even made the stat sheet yet because they hadn't done a thing. And yet they both did what you need your best players to do when it's quote unquote winning time at the end of the game. Brian Burns made probably the biggest defensive play of the game. He was dominant in the fourth quarter. Kayvon Thibodeau only had a half a sack and a couple of other tackles, and his stat sheet doesn't look that great. But Thibodeau was in the backfield buzzing around Geno Smith the entire fourth quarter. So So massive props to those three players.
Yeah, and what they wound up with 7 sacks?
7 sacks.
And I read after the game that the Giants are now actually leading the NFL in sacks
22.
with 22. So yeah, I think part of that is I shouldn't say my and other fans' unrealistic expectations. Neither one of them is a top 10 edge defender right now. I think you have to say, and I think people drool at the sight of Aiden Hutchinson, who seems to be getting into the backfield every time the ball is snapped. I mean, he's had an amazing career so far, but you look at the team effort under Shane Bowen, and they are getting pressure now. I think they blitzed more yesterday than I anticipated that they would do. I wrote a piece earlier in the week about him probably not blitzing that much because he didn't want to leave his defensive backs on an island against those receivers. But I thought I don't know exactly how many times, but I thought he brought up extra man quite a bit. I think they were playing a lot in dime defense yesterday, and however they were doing it, they were getting the pressure, and as you say, in the fourth quarter, that's the other thing, is that not all sacks, not all pressures are created equal. A pressure or a sack in the first quarter of a game is nice, but when the game is on the line in the fourth quarter and you've got a narrow lead that you're trying to defend, putting pressure on the quarterback then, I think, has added weight. And how many times have we seen the Giants on the other end of that, where the Giants were trying to come back a few points down, and their offensive line could not hold up under the pass rush that the other team was bringing late in the fourth quarter, and they were never able to mount a winning drive. And so I thought it was really refreshing yesterday to see the Giants defense being the one that was winning the game in the end, after the offense certainly did its part through most of the game. But the defense really won that game in the end. And as for Tay Banks, I remember early in the game seeing him knock away a pass for DK Metcalf. I said, "Oh my God, he put his hand in there. He actually played the ball for a change." And so I think you have to give props to him and the rest of the defensive backs. Seattle did not look like a team that has as dangerous a passing offense as they actually do. I mean, those are three good wide receivers they have out there, and Metcalf, to me, is if he's not a top 10 receiver in the NFL, he's not much less than that. He's a very dangerous and very physical receiver, and so I thought the Giants secondary really did a very nice job on the receivers yesterday.
Absolutely, Tony. I do want to talk about a couple of things on offense before we get to individual players and things like that, though. We're talking about things that we don't ordinarily see from the Giants or haven't seen recently from the Giants. How about the idea that they go on a 15-play drive to start the game, and then Eric Gray fumbles the ball away on 4th and 1 at the goal line, and Seattle returns it 102 yards for a touchdown? I think every Giants fan thought, "Oh, here we go. Here we go. This is going to be 28-6, 40-0, embarrassing blowout, over with by the end of the first quarter." And then it changed. And it's easy to talk about resilience, which NFL teams do all the time, and the Giants do. It's a different thing to show it. And just when I think about that start in that environment, it told me a lot about just how hard this team plays. Because they could have easily just said, "Oh, we lose all the time. We're 1-3. We started this way. We're toast. Let's just go take a shower and go home."
Yeah, and that's a 14-point swing, right?
Hmm.
That year. So you can really imagine that that could take the air out of the tires if you don't have the mental toughness to deal with it. I'm still not convinced that the ball was out by the time it crossed the plane of the goal line. And it drives me crazy that the NFL doesn't have a better way to determine whether a ball has crossed the goal line or not. I mean, they managed to do this in soccer, and I don't know why the NFL can't do something similar. But that's a different discussion. As you say, the larger story is that they really didn't bat an eyelash,
Hmm.
having gone down by 7 when they should have been up by 7, and they just came back and they just played the game. And so that to me, I think is tremendous mental toughness, because as you said earlier, that place is a very difficult place to play. I don't know whether it's just the arrangement of the stadium or whether people who live in Seattle are louder and more boisterous than people elsewhere. I mean, I've been to Seattle. It's a beautiful city, actually, and I've never seen the people there don't look like, boisterous, loud people, but in that stadium, they really bring up the noise. And and the Giants, just it seemed like they didn't miss a beat after that. They just went on and played their game, which maybe is the most impressive thing they did yesterday.
I don't think they had a single false start penalty, which in that environment was pretty amazing. And one of everybody talked about how are the Giants going to play offense without Malik Neighbors and without Devin Singletary, and because that's 57% of the yardage that they had going into the game, and such a high percentage of the touches. And it was just really, really impressive to see the ball get spread around. Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Theo Johnson with his best game as a pro, even Eric Gray, who makes me nervous every time he touches the ball. The guy's got 5 fumbles in 58 career NFL touches, which is just atrocious. But he still had a couple of big pass receptions. Um, that they spread the ball around. Very impressive, and maybe a good thing going forward too. But um, got to talk about Darius Slayton. He came in bad thumb, came in. It looked to me like he was body catching a lot of balls, especially the short ones that were thrown kind of hard at him. He was body catching them because maybe he didn't want to take the hit on his hand. But reminder from Slayton of how good a player he is. Doing his Malik Neighbors impersonation yesterday, and props to him. And just props to the entire receiving corps for stepping up.
Yeah, and he finished with, I think, something like 122 yards
Mm-hmm.
yesterday. And I mean, he's been such a funny character in Giants history, because when you look at what he's accomplished, he's one of the NFL's better receivers, and he's led the Giants in receiving, I think, all but 1 year that he's been in the league, and that's probably not going to happen this year once Malik Neighbors gets back on the field. But when the Giants needed someone last year, when Tyrod Taylor and Tommy DeVito needed to find someone to throw the ball to, Darius Slayton was a lot of times the guy, right? And people get annoyed with him because he has drops, and that's of course that's another thing about yesterday's game. The Giants should have really run up the score even more, but they had at least 3 drops of passes that should have been caught that I can think
Two
of.
by Wan'Dale Robinson, one in the final drive of the first half, and one on the first drive of the third quarter, and both took potential points off the board.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
as
that's
good
the
a
game.
game as he played, it could have been a great game if he catches those 2 balls.
I mean, when you come down to it, the Giants dominated that game yesterday. I mean, it's rare that I think you can say that about the Giants, but they didn't just win that game. They dominated the game. The Seattle offense was doing a lot of nothing during the first almost 3 quarters of that game. and the Giants' offense was driving fairly consistently, and you had the play at the goal line, which was a 14-point reversal, and then you have the 3 drops, and without those 3 drops. And without the fumble at the goal line, I think the Giants are leading by 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And so, anyway,
Imagine
but
that.
yeah, really, and yeah, Slayton is a good wide receiver. Now they benefited from the fact that Reek Woolen got hurt halfway through the game, and so Seattle didn't have their full complement of cornerbacks out there. But the other cornerback, Devon Witherspoon, was still out there too, right? And so, the Giants receivers are a pretty good group, and people I think have forgotten about that this year because Neighbors rightly has gotten so much of the attention. But they're a good group. They do have a problem with drops, but they're actually a good set of receivers.
And the other guy we have to talk about is Tyrone Tracy. Coming out party for Tyrone Tracy on Sunday. And I know personally, I have been looking forward to a game where the Giants had to ride Tyrone Tracy as at running back. Ever since the Giants drafted him in the 5th round, people have said, "Oh, that's a steal. He's going to outplay that draft stock." A lot of people predicted that he would be Giants RB1 before the season was over, and he may have staked a claim to that on Sunday. It's just so impressive to see him press the hole, get up in there with no hesitation, and break through, push the pile, protect the football, which, considering what Devin Singletary and Eric Gray have done so far this year, has to be a factor. But it was very, very impressive, and very encouraging, because we know who the Giants let go to Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that the theory has always been that you don't need that 1st round pick to have a good running attack. And I think Tyrone Tracy gave the Giants that on Sunday, and maybe there's a lot more of that to come.
Yeah, I had never heard of Tyrone Tracy when the Giants drafted him. I remember on draft day when the draft got to the 4th round, I was hoping that the Giants would take a running back. I think Braylon Allen, who went to the Jets, if I remember correctly, was still on the board, and he looks really good. And I think he went off the board before the Giants picked. And I thought in the 4th round, oh, this would be a great place for the Giants to pick a running back. But by the time it got to the Giants, I think all the running backs that I was interested in were off the board, and I was a little disappointed. And then they come around in round 5 and take Tracy, and I said, okay, who's this guy? And I saw him on Chris Flum's big board, but I'd never heard of him, didn't know anything about him. So I went searching for him, and these guys at Purdue put together an 11-minute highlight tape of Tyrone Tracy at Purdue. And yeah, as some people know, Tyrone Tracy had originally been a wide receiver and transferred to Purdue. I can't remember from where, but maybe from another Big Ten school.
Iowa,
thank you. And his coach, I guess, at Purdue basically said, you're not really going to make it as a wide receiver. Why don't you try being a running back? And so he comes to the running back position with more of a wide receiver mentality, I guess, because that's what he was trained as. And I watched this 11-minute highlight tape of his, and I was just wowed because on the Purdue tape he shows this tremendous contact balance and the ability to make guys miss and to stay on his feet after he's hit. And I said, wow, this guy looks like he could actually be something. And ever since he's come to the Giants, I've been waiting through the first few weeks, and I haven't really seen too much in the first few. He looked okay running the ball the first few games. But yesterday I'm watching him and saying, oh my God, this is the guy I saw on the Purdue tape. And he really, I thought, did did a heck of a job during that game, and he broke 100 yards yesterday rushing. And I don't know that I'm ready to anoint him RB1 on the Giants, but I might be ready to say at the very least they should have a pretty constant rotation back and forth between Singletary and Tracy. He's a dangerous looking back.
Absolutely. And today, overall, Tony, today's a good day to be a Giants fan. Looking forward to next Sunday night. This is one of the reasons why when the schedule comes out, way back in the spring, whenever the schedule comes out, we always do these game by game predictions, trying to figure out which games teams will win and which games they're going to lose. And, months and months ago, you would have looked at Giants versus Cincinnati Bengals and thought, the Giants can't stay on the field with the Bengals. There's no chance. The Bengals are a Super Bowl contender, yada, yada. That's a loss. Well, the Giants come in with a 2-3 record, which is not necessarily impressive, but they have played, they've won 2 out of their last 4. They've played better football. They come in on the high of Sunday night. And this is a reeling, what the heck happened to us, Cincinnati team that's going to be showing up Sunday night at MetLife Stadium. They're 1-4. They come off a devastating loss in overtime to the Ravens. They don't look anything like what we thought they were going to be. And I know the Giants will probably be a small underdog in this game, but this is another game that the Giants can win. It's just amazing. I don't think anyone would have predicted, a few weeks ago that the Giants would come into this game with a better record than Cincinnati.
No, and I think we always assume that the Giants are going to be at a disadvantage against some of these well-known teams, but Cincinnati can't defend. Okay, I think they've lost talent on that side of the ball, and the Ravens, really kind of scored at will against them. Cincinnati should have won that game several times yesterday, but managed not to. Washington threw the ball all over the place. Now, granted, Jaden Daniels is looking great as a rookie, but Washington had no problem at Cincinnati going up and down the field against that Cincinnati defense, and so I think there's an opportunity there for the Giants to score points, and they just have to hold on to the ball. And if they can, I think they can move the ball. I think the bigger test will be on the defensive side of the ball, because Cincinnati still has a very potent offense, and Burrow is still a very talented. In my mind, he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Not everyone agrees with that, but I think he's a top 5 quarterback. And he's a tough son of a gun. He's somebody who will really stand in against the pass rush and take his hits in order to get rid of the ball. Of course, he's gotten hurt a few times because of that. But they're not an easy team to play, but it's another game that's winnable.
Absolutely. And Jamar Chase is incredible. So hopefully the Giants will be able to contain him and not let him turn 1-yard quick dump offs into 70-yard touchdowns like Chase did yesterday.
Yeah.
So anyway, Tony, appreciate the time. A good day to be a Giants fan. And as always, Giants fans, we thank you for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.